Welcome to the Red Tail Fan Travel Reimbursement System. First step, set up the folders. Welcome folks. Today I'd like to demonstrate a travel reimbursement system I have created. I used to use a third-party tool, Document Studio or Autocrat, to do all the mail merging and emailing and everything. And in this example, I've written all the scripts myself. So let me start with the first section, which is creating your folder structure. So I have a folder structure, Red Tail Fan System and Travel System, and in that folder, I have a form. This is the form. We'll go over that in a bit. I have the spreadsheet that is connected to the form. That's this spreadsheet here. The data is collected on that sheet there. And we have a travel template. Let me go ahead and open that up. The travel template merges the data that is submitted on the form into the sheet, and the sheet then calculates the total miles and does all the calculations onto the areas so that you can get a total amount. When you build a system like this, then we also add a folder inside of the system where we collect the finished product. And we'll need, as we go through this and look at the script, we'll need the folder ID, we will need the template ID, and we will need the ID to the response sheet. First step after creating your folders is to create a form. And I'm not going to take the time to create the form. I'll just show you what elements I have on the form. It's divided into several sections. We collect an email address, first, last name, contact number, what school district they work for, mailing address to mail a check to them, and the purpose of the different travel. Mileage reimbursement, do you have any mileage, yes or no? And then you put in your start date, end date. Where did you start your trip? Where did you end your trip? Was it round trip? If it's not round trip, you jump to this section so that you can determine where someone started and ended if it wasn't round trip. Meal reimbursement, yes or no? The number of breakfast, lunch, and dinners. Any other additional reimbursements, yes or no? And then put in the dollar amount and what they're for, and then an electronic signature. Once you've created the form, it's important to move on to creating the template. The template is made however you want it to look. The important part of the template is that you match inside of these cells where I have the curly bracket names. It's important that these curly brackets exactly match the headers that we have here. So instance, first name, last name. If you want that to show up on the merged document, then first name, last name inside of the double curly brackets. And you can see we've added purpose of trip, starting date, return date, starting and ending location, round trip, and so forth. Put them in a couple of times. And then these things are all calculations based on the numbers that are put in here. So breakfast becomes a number, lunch becomes a number, and so forth. And then this calculation is that times that. So you set up, and all of these are basically set up this way. Some of these are sums. For instance, the total down here is the sum of these different fields here. So we want to make sure that that document that gets created has those calculations and also has the correct format for putting in the headers inside of double curly quotes. We had gone over the folder structure. We created this additional folder in here. We also have created the form and the template. Let's take a look at the form response sheet. So the form response sheet, here's an example of the one that I have created already. I've renamed the form responses 1 to data. And I've also put in a grouping here so that I could basically hide all this information that I'm collecting all the way up to the initials. If we could take a look at our form, the last thing we collect is the initials. So what we're doing here is I'm just hiding that to make it a little bit easier to see. And then I've added 4 extra columns in here. I've added a column called doc URL, a column called travel sheet URL, a column called status, and a column called approval date. And down here, you can see I've added a couple of other sheets to this as well. We'll get to that part later. But here's our status sheet. And in this status sheet, I'm basically collecting some data by using some array literals to pull in the data from my data sheet. But then on these, I'm actually doing some calculations. I'm calculating my mileage, my cost. I'm bringing in the qualified meals. Here I'm calculating the meals cost based on whatever your organization pays for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and so forth. And here we're collecting that. And the reason we're creating the status column is I'm using it in my summary column. And this summary is something I've set up so that I could use my special menu here to email this summary sheet to your administrator. And this is a sheet that is summarizing the total expenses that your organization is incurring and keeping track in real time of all of this information. So let's get to the heart of the matter, which is the app script that make all this happen. So on my response sheet, I will jump into my app script. Let's take a look at which app scripts we've added. The first one, of course, is the menu. My menu script creates the menu, travel reimbursement, and it creates these three things here that we can click on, process the sheet for the forms to sheets. That's going to take the submitted forms, which, by the way, we can set up with a trigger to have it happen on form submit, and then that would create the documents for the data that's been submitted. This one approves the documents, and this one emails the summary sheets. So the part of it is here. When you're working with an app script like this, we do have some fields that need to be changed. For instance, the template ID. Now that is this travel reimbursement template, and the ID, of course, would be this area here after the D/ and before the /edit. So we looked at that. That ends in UC, and you can see that's that ID. So we're grabbing that ID. The folder ID is this folder. This folder here, actually, and you can see it ends in a QE. Let's take a look at that. We can see, yes, that's the one we're looking for. The response sheet ID is this spreadsheet. Here's its URL, and here's its, this part here is the ID, ends in an FOE. Let's take a look at that, ends in an FOE, and here, of course, is the full URL. And then we're putting in either, in this case, we commented out the admin email, but we're putting in the assistant email. And then what we're doing is, as we work through this, we're opening the template, we're opening the response sheet, we're getting the sheet by name data because I've renamed this one to data. You could have a different name for that. We're getting the headers of this sheet. So that's going to be all the headers all the way across here to approval date. And we're mapping those headers. And the reason we want to do that is I want to get these header names. Then we can use those header names. And here we're talking about a few of them. Some required headers are travel sheet name, first name, last name, email address. This is just a logger that is letting us know if something is missing from the sheet. And then the response data is the values of everything that is on this data sheet. So response data for each, what we're doing is we're using the column map. In this case, we're one of the first things we're doing is don't run this. Do not run this if you find a URL in this column here. Don't run it. It's already got a URL. If you were going to run this merge document, don't need to do it for rows that already have a URL. When it does run, however, you take the new spreadsheet, you create a new spreadsheet by making a copy of the template, and then you are getting those sheets. You're setting some variables here for first name, last name, and email, and then you are getting the values that were submitted on the form or the values that are found in those header rows. We're creating a new title for the spreadsheet, which is the first name, last name, travel reimbursement form. And then we're setting some formulas in specific cells. As we pointed out back here on this, some of these are actual formulas. And so what we're doing on the script is we're setting those formulas. There's another function down here called we are set formulas in these different documents, in these different cells, excuse me. And then the next section here is email. So if there's an email address found in the email section, we're going to email first name, last name, travel reimbursement form. The body of this email, we'll show you one of these when we run this, will have a hyperlink to the new spreadsheet and a hyperlink to the response spreadsheet, because this email is being sent to the administrator, letting them know that a new travel form was sent. And then, so here's where we get our column maps, and this is where we are setting those formulas in the cells. We identified these cells, and that's in this document here. We identified which one of these cells need a particular formula set back into them. So that's our merge document. Our approve script document, our approve script is, again, we're getting the response sheet ID, we're setting our admin email, we're opening up the response sheet, we're getting the sheet 0, which really I should change this response sheet, get sheet. In fact, I'll do this right now. We're going to get sheet by name, because this is better in case you move that sheet from the 0 position, and we'll call this data. And let's go ahead and save that change. Then we're getting those values. We're also doing a column map here because we want to have the ability in here to move these columns around and still have it work, or if we were to add columns. And doing this column map way of getting the names and where those columns actually live is a little bit more robust way to do this. And then we are, in this case, finding out how many rows that we are approving. We're going to use that in a pop-up. And then our response data for each, we're identifying the status. That's the column map status, the approval date, and so forth. So these match what you find here: status, approval date, and so forth. First name, last name, and that's being done by using this column mapping. You could, if we ran this, you'd see this console.log is showing us what this column mapping is doing. If the status is approved and it has an approval date, we're going to skip it. Otherwise, and also another if in here, if it says do not approve, for instance, if the administrator wanted to type in here do not approve, then it would skip that as well. Otherwise, it opens that spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet is the new document that was created. So for instance, let me come here and open up one of these. It would open up each one of these documents, and what it will do, I see this one's not been approved yet. What we'll do is, in this script, we're going to open that up, and in a certain cell of that, we're going to put in an approval, date, by whom, and then we're going to create from there a PDF and email that to the administrator that we've identified up in the top there. And that should be about it for that. Now, an important function here, this is a custom function. This is how we are setting up the mileage. We'll jump back to that here in a moment. Wanted to spend a moment and go over this mileage function. This mileage function is a custom function that I can call from, and this function is also part of, in fact, we can take a peek at this. This function is also in the template spreadsheet as well. And what this function does is we've defined a function, and we're using these params here to show the starting and end point, and we're returning the distance in miles. And we're identifying this as a custom function that the spreadsheet can then use. And it's using a Google Maps API to get directions and then calculating the mileage between point A and point B. So what you can see here when we come to the status where I actually have the mileage, you can see this mileage is a function, and this information that we've set up here in this params is what we're seeing here. So this example is cell reference start, cell reference end. I think we can see all of that information in there, and then it is a custom function that gets the driving distance, and you can see the distance. Well, that's that part there. So this is a custom function, and the two variables it takes is the starting point and ending point. So what we're doing in this function here is saying, okay, start here, end here, and then you calculate the mileage. And if it's if this round trip is equal to yes, then you multiply it times 2. So that's the custom function. The approval function. We had looked here at our different functions. Here's our approval function. Let's see what happens when we run it. So we can run that from here, approve travel sheets. What it's doing is going through this list, and anyone that has not been approved is being approved. We can see that one row is approved. We say, okay, it's been marked as approved, and it shows us the date. Now, that function, when it ran, approval was going to email the person that you have listed as your admin, assistant admin. And also, if we take a look here, what the email piece has done is it is going to create a PDF blob. It's going to put in the new date and the approved by and the person's name. and then it's going to email that as a PDF. So first of all, let's look and see what has happened with this Tom Bombadillo, which we have opened. Now notice Tom Bombadillo is now approved, and it says it's approved, and it tells us by whom and when that was approved. So that piece has happened, but in addition, the email address that we have this set up to this particular user, let me quickly pause and bring in that email system. So as you can see, this is the email address that we had set up for to receive that approval, and we open that up, and you can see, dear Tom Bombadillo, your travel reimbursement form has been approved. And when you click on that, when they click on that, now this email, if we switch back here in one moment, we can see that that was sent to that Twelter WebHand account, but it also would have been sent to the address that we have in here. So this account would also receive, the person that filled out the form would also receive an email saying that their travel reimbursement has been, it'd be the same copy that we just saw mailed to the other person, and you would be able to see that it had been approved. Another feature I added to this, oh, by the way, on the approval, if you were to run the approval system again, and you can see all the rows are already approved or marked as do not approve, you get that prompt letting you know that they've already been approved. Another feature is the summary feature, and what we're doing here is basically created a dashboard to kind of give an idea of how many breakfasts, lunches, and dinners and so forth, purpose of the trip. Some of this data you're looking at here is looking at some older data, but the rest of this is the actual live data. You can see we have 3 requests here. We come to the status. We got 3 people that have requested. We should show this much in mileage cost, $657. So if we come here, we should see $657 on the status. If we showed additional expenses, it should be $1250, and so forth. So we're pulling all that data into this sheet so that we can email it. What happens when I run the email script? It emails it, and now it's finished. Let me come back to, let me open up a new tab here. Let me open up my email. Give that a moment to come in. I should see an email with that summary sheet. So again, this is happening on this email summary sheet. We're getting the summary sheet. We are getting the summary sheet ID, and then we are using these PDF options, setting up these PDF options, and then we're emailing, creating a PDF blob of the particular of this particular GID of the summary sheet ID. We're emailing it to this address, you know, with a subject line and so forth. So let's see if that's come in yet. Here we have the summary sheet PDF, and you could have the text there, say whatever you'd like, and what that person receives, administrator receives, is an ongoing idea of what these travel reimbursements are adding up to. Now, it is possible that this email summary sheet could be set up with a trigger, and that could be emailed at the first of a week, first of a month, and so forth. So the main administrator could be tracking how those things are working. So again, we collect data, we merge it to a template, we then are able from our management sheet to open up any sheet. I could open up the Tim Welch travel reimbursement, I could actually see if it's been approved, and so forth. We build a summary sheet, sort of a staging center to do these calculations so that we can create a summary. Now each of these is a different set of calculations. This is a map lambda. This is a array formula by row. Again, this is just pulling in the data from the data sheet. Again, another calculation and another calculation. So if you're interested, this is a way to use Google Sheets to create a system using a form. And here's our form. Here's what our form looks like. And the person you would send this form out to different people, and there's different sections of it. They would fill it out. We would then set this up. I have not set this one up yet, but if I had, I would actually set up a trigger. I'll just run through that real quick. No trigger set yet. If I wanted to add a trigger, it looks like I have something I need to check there, but I would want to set up a trigger for the merge form data to template, and then I would run that on form submit. And I think I can see what the problem is here. I seem to have a couple of get column get column maps. So I'm going to have to check that, and I'm going to go ahead and save that, authorize it, allow it. And now with that trigger set, when the form is submitted, I would see the data showing up in here. So thanks for watching.